Well, another week brings another week of more chaos, heartbreak, and insanity. So let's go ahead and break down the absolute chaos and joy that was the NFL Week 14. So we're going to kick things off here, briefly covering Thursday Night Football. Henry Inzer did his thing on Thursday night, but the Patriots winning 21-18, and New England looked amazing in the first half. Bailey Zappi looked like the guy, and it looks like the Patriots will be moving forward with Bailey Zappi, as he does seem to be the guy for them. Meanwhile, the Steelers, you lost 2 weeks in a row to two teams that have a combined 4-20 record whenever they faced you. That does not bode well for a team that's currently somehow still the 6th seed in the playoff picture. Don't ask me how, but somehow they are. Up next, we had an incredible game for Tank Division. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers beating the Atlanta Falcons 29-25 in an absolute tight thriller of a game. This game was absolutely critical, as the NFC South is going to be a division that is going to be up for grabs all the way until Week 18, I believe. So seeing this game and how close it was, and the fact that now the top three are tied with the Panthers eliminated, that is just absolutely insane to think about. Tampa Bay is able to win an essential game for them, basically, in a tight fashion. Baker Mayfield once again playing well whenever he's the underdog. That's a common trend of this Buccaneers team. When Baker's the underdog, they play well. And Atlanta, you're starting to look good. You had a tough loss, but Desmond Ridder is actually starting to look decent at quarterback now, which is, that's a far cry from where he was at the start of the season now, wasn't it? So Atlanta, you got a bright future. Tampa Bay, you're playing well as the underdog. And New Orleans is somewhere in the mix doing whatever they do. It's going to be a fun division to watch. Up next, we got a game that I'm still a little bitter about. The Los Angeles Rams losing to the Baltimore Ravens 31-37 in overtime. Now, we knew as Rams fans that this was going to be a loss. We circled this game as a loss on the schedule pretty much at the beginning of the season, because the Ravens were doing really well. The Rams were struggling early on. We really thought this was going to be a loss. Now, it's not the fact that we lost that's a killer. It's the fact in the way we lost. It was a tight back-and-forth game. Stafford had, I think it was almost 300 yards passing. Kyren Williams over 200 yards on the ground. This team looked electric, and they looked really good. But the big killer is, for me, I watched that last drive whenever Fox moved us over, and it was brutal. There was a couple of PI calls that should have been PI on the Ravens, but they didn't call them. You know, just casually throwing down a receiver is not PI for whatever reason. But either way, I digress. The Ravens looking good, really playing decent football, and the Rams look to be back. The Ravens looking at the #1 seed in the AFC, really having the advantage right now. And the Rams are trying to make a push. This team could cause a lot of chaos in the playoffs, this Rams team, if they can make the playoffs. That's a big if, though, because Minnesota has a relatively soft schedule, but they did only beat Vegas by 3, so they could very well drop out. Seattle's falling off. So really, that's the biggest problem is Minnesota. If this Rams team can make the playoffs, because the Packers are pretty much going to win out, then the Rams have a really good chance at making some noise and possibly disrupting the entire playoff picture. Up next, we have the Detroit Lions getting absolutely blown out by the Chicago Bears, 28-13. This game was absolutely insane to watch. The Lions, once again, back to the turnovers. This has been a problem for them. In that couple games, Skid, where they looked pretty bad, they were losing the turnover battle. It was bad. They could not control the ball. And same thing today. They had, I think, 2 or 3 turnovers in that game on Sunday. And it was bad for them. Chicago looking good. They have a bright future. Justin Fields starting to really shape up and look the guy. First half was all about the ground game. Second half was all about the air game. They proved that they can beat you both ways. They can beat you in the air. They can beat you on the ground. They will cause damage. And the Bears are looking very dangerous right now for the next couple seasons. Up next, we have Jake Browning, the legend, beating the Indianapolis Colts 34-14, although Jake Browning did leave the game for a little bit because of injury, so A.J. McCarron came in for the Bengals. But Jake Browning was looking really good, like really good 2 weeks in a row. This Bengals team is going to be dangerous with Jake Browning at quarterback. Even though Joe Burrow's out, this team can still be dangerous and lethal. And for Indianapolis, y'all were due for a bad game. Let's just be real. Y'all were winning way too many games, way too close, just like the Steelers. You were due for a bad game. And this might lead into a bad stretch depending on what happens next week. But you're facing the Steelers. You should be fine next week. Up next, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars getting beat by the Cleveland Browns 31-27. This game was interesting, to say the least. Flacco's looking like he is the guy in Cleveland. Even though Deshaun Watson is out, it looks like Joe Flacco really is taking this team to the next level, which is very surprising considering how old Flacco is. I thought he would have been a lot more washed by now. But still, point stands. Joe Flacco is leading this team like crazy. I mean, this team was looking great under him. Jacksonville, you had a nice effort, but yeah, that defense didn't do their job as well as they needed to. Didn't really get to the quarterback. Flacco only took 1 sack, which is not quite what you would expect out of this Jags defense. And your offense really just did not look amazing. Was it maybe because Trevor Lawrence was starting less than a week after having a high ankle sprain? I'm not sure, but things just looked out of sync with Jacksonville yesterday. Up next, we have the Carolina Panthers, who are completely checked out of this season, going against the New Orleans Saints and losing 28-6. The Panthers, I mean, what are you playing for? You're trying to not give Chicago the #1 overall pick, yet you're playing like you don't physically care about the season anymore. This team has no heart, they have no will, they have no push. This team is just absolutely abysmal in all facets, and they are not showing any sense of urgency right now. Despite the fact they hired their head coach, I get it, they cleaned house, it's going to be troublesome, but still, come on. 6 points against the Saints team, that's not really great. New Orleans, great job. You won a crucial game against a team that's mentally checked out. Good job. You're still in it for Tank Division, tied for first. Up next, we got a game that might have some long-term playoff implications here. The Houston Texans falling to the New York Jets 30-6. Not just in the final score and the records of it being an impact in the playoff picture, but the fact that C.J. Stroud, the Texans, they tried hard, and it's understandable they lost. The Jets defense is really good. So, you know, C.J. Stroud getting baffled by him, he was due for a bad game, and it makes sense. But there is concern, as C.J. Stroud is now in concussion protocol. Will he be back for next week? If he misses a couple of weeks, this Texans team could drop a couple games and drop out of the playoff picture entirely. So that is really a big concern now for Houston. Meanwhile, for the Jets, you got the much-needed win, and you still keep yourself alive in the playoff picture. It's going to be tough, but Zach Wilson balled out and looked amazing. He came back with a vengeance, and man, he looked good doing so. Up next, since I already did the video on Minnesota-Vegas, we're going to move over to Seattle-San Francisco with the Niners winning 28-16. Fun fact, their last time these two teams played, they also put up a combined 44 points, but point stands. San Fran was dominant, but they did keep Seattle in it for way too long. Seattle was in it as late as even into the beginning of the fourth quarter. So San Fran, I mean, they get a win. It was a sloppy win turnover-wise, and it was not pretty. But they get the win. They're now in charge of first place of the NFC. Now, I am recording this before Monday Night Football, so we don't know if the Niners clinched just yet. But if the Giants come up big and beat the Packers, then the San Francisco 49ers will be the first team to clinch a playoff spot. Who would have thought that the Niners would have been the one to clinch first if the Packers lose? We would have thought that the Eagles would have been the one to lose or clinch it first because they were 9-1, I think, at one point. Or no, they were 10-1, then they lost 2 straight. So that's kind of a turn of events there for San Francisco. Seattle, meanwhile, you fought hard with Drew Lock, but it's Drew Lock. You were not going to win that game from the get-go, and that's really what happened. Up next, we have a little bit of a controversial end to a game. The Buffalo Bills beating the Kansas City Chiefs 20-17. Everyone's going to talk about the Kadarius Toney incident and the fact that, oh, was he offside? You don't call offside on the offense without warning. Let's be real here. Kadarius Toney, his head was maybe in line with the ball, if not forward, ahead of the ball a little bit, right? And his foot was completely ahead of his body almost. So that egregious of a call should not need a warning. And that's really what it comes down to. There should not have necessarily been a warning because it was so egregious. It's just like if the line of scrimmage is here, the offense is here, defense is here, and you're on the offense lining up over here. It's too egregious. You're not going to give them a warning and say, hey, bud, you're offside. So I think that was a totally fair call. I'm not a big fan of what Patrick Mahomes did after the game, just whining. He was whining about that whole thing. He goes to Josh Allen, and as opposed to saying good game and just keeping his mouth shut, he's like, oh, that's the worst call I've ever seen. And then him and Andy Reid just start crying to the media for sympathy, like you haven't won on missed calls or bad calls before. Come on, Chiefs. That's absolutely embarrassing for your organization. And honestly, I hope you don't get the 1 seed at this point because you don't look like you deserve it if you're going to be like crybabies after this. Meanwhile, Buffalo, on the other hand, you got a hot start. You had a little bit of trouble in the middle of the game, but overall you managed to do just enough to get the win in a close game for a change. That's a good feeling for you. You're still the 11 seed, but you might have a little bit of momentum going for the rest of the season, which could do enough with the top teams that are 7-6 starting to falter. Up next, we have the Denver Broncos beating the Los Angeles Chargers 24-7. And man, Denver, you did what you needed. You did exactly what you needed. You came in, you saw, you conquered, and you just absolutely dominated that game from opening whistle to closing whistle. Meanwhile, Chargers, that's tough. You lost Justin Herbert to a fractured finger on his throwing hand, so he's probably not playing Thursday night. So have fun with Easton Stick. Actually, though, he did look a lot better than Herbert in his limited time in the game. He looked better overall, so the Chargers might be in decent hands on Thursday night against Vegas. And it is Vegas, so let's be real here. It's not going to hurt you long term as long as Herbert can return after next week. And last but not least, we have an absolute domination. The Cowboys completely bent the Philadelphia Eagles over and just did their way with them. It was absolute domination on every facet. I mean, Dallas just, all cylinders were firing. The offense was great. The defense was amazing. It was just, I mean, this team is looking scary. You do not want to face the Dallas Cowboys right now. It is absolutely scary if you have to face them. Meanwhile, Philadelphia, what is going on with them? The defense is tired. They're lethargic. They're not looking great. The offense is also looking lethargic. This team just overall is looking like a team that's waking up in the morning after getting 2 hours of sleep and having to take on the day. They're groggy. They're slow. They're lethargic. They're not in the game. And that's the problem. This Eagles team is going to have to turn things around if they want to make things work. All right, we have a little bit of a wardrobe change because this is covering the Monday night games, as we just did have a great time covering the Giants beating the Packers at home. Final score 24-21, and man, this game was a treat. Jordan Love struggling through part of the game, and Tommy DeVito having a very clean game. The Packers doing everything they could try on defense, but alas, the special teams did catch up to them, having a few special teams mistakes at key moments and a couple of missed field goals that really hurt them. Saquon almost costing the Giants late with a fumble, but the Giants able to do it because Tommy DeVito is that clutch guy. And the Giants might have their new quarterback. They might not need to go for the draft. They might have their new quarterback once Daniel Jones is gone in Tommy DeVito. He has been looking really solid for this team over the last few weeks, and he is looking really good. Now, Green Bay, you took a loss. And yeah, your loss sends San Francisco into the playoffs, being the first team to clinch. Congratulations, San Francisco. But the Packers, you lost a relatively easy game. You still kind of control your destiny. But man, that loss is going to sting down the stretch. I just have that gut feeling that might cost you in the end. I mean, you have a relatively easy schedule the rest of the way out, but you do play the Buccaneers, who are a good team when they are the underdog. So we'll see how that plays out. A little bit more concerned for Green Bay after this week, but I do think they will rebound. Alright, and last but not least for this video, we have the Tennessee Titans taking on the Miami Dolphins. And let's just say, I'm recording this while the game is still going on, but it sure looks like Tennessee might have a solid chance of coming away with this one. 27-21 is the current score at the 2-minute warning, with Tennessee having the ball at the Miami 13. I've seen enough of this game to say, hey, let's record this. Miami is a very one-dimensional team. Whenever their players start going down, especially Tyreek Hill, this team is very one-dimensional. And we saw that. When Tyreek Hill was out of the game, Miami just did not play well at all. When Tyreek Hill came back into the game later on in the second half, like towards the fourth quarter, this team jumped alive all of a sudden because the playbook was wide open. But this team cannot be so one-dimensional through Tyreek Hill, and I think that's kind of what we're seeing. The good teams are shutting down Tyreek Hill, whereas the bad teams aren't. And that's the real problem that we're having with the Dolphins. And that might be the Achilles heel that gets them in the playoffs. Teams know to cover Tyreek Hill, and especially tonight was a screaming representation of it, that this team is very one-dimensional, so that if Tyreek goes down, the team goes down with him. And that's not good for a playoff contender. Meanwhile, Tennessee, what a job by Will Levis tonight. When the game was on the line, he could have very well shut himself down. Now they have it at the Miami 6, so they are just driving this down the throat of the Dolphins. But man, Miami could have just shut down whenever there was like 2:40 to go, or like, you know, a couple minutes to go, and down 14. They could have just packed up shop, you know, and said, hey, it's over, we lost. But no, he kept fighting. Will Levis played the game like it was on the line, and he played extremely well in this situation to do everything that they had to do, in the Tennessee defense coming up big when they needed it, to allow the Titans to be at least within striking distance, if not take over the game at the end and win it. Final score will be down here, so you'll know who won. I don't, because I'm recording this during the game. But yeah, that is the deal right now. And this team, the Titans are looking solid, and the Dolphins are very one-dimensional. Alright, well that's about gonna do it for me today. If you guys did like, don't forget to smash like and subscribe, as it does help me out a whole lot. It tells me that I'm making content that y'all enjoy and that I should keep doing what I'm doing. And if you haven't already, make sure you go ahead down here and check out my New England Patriots post-mortem video, where I break down the 2023 New England Patriots, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I break down the future of this organization, and I'll go into detail on that. And I guess with that, I will see you guys later. Peace out and have a good one.